Hey guys, tonight we're slipping not marching back through the sands of time, not to witness the pharaohs in gold or the gods in stone, but to feel what it was actually like to survive just one day under the eye of Ra. Because Egypt wasn't just pyramids and poetry, it was sweat, it was sand in your teeth, it was sunburn before sunscreen, rules before freedom, and gods before comfort. So tonight, we're not visiting a museum, we're living a moment, one dawn to dusk cycle in a world where the afterlife was complicated, but staying alive through breakfast was harder. Before you get comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little time machine we've built together. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing this sleepy corner of the internet stretch across time zones. Now dim the lights, turn on a fan for that soft background hum, or just imagine the hiss of desert wind sneaking through a cracked clay wall. Because we're waking up in ancient Egypt, and the sun isn't just rising, it's coming for you. At first you don't know where you are, and there's that brief moment of waking confusion, the same kind that hits you when you fall asleep in a hotel and forget what city you're in. But this isn't a hotel, and that smell, that's not coffee brewing or breakfast sizzling on a stove, that's Nile dust, clay walls, body heat, and something sweet sour, like fermenting barley or the inside of a bread oven that's never quite cooled. Your body is slick, your forehead damp, your chest and lower back a sheet of dew, and it's not even dawn yet. The sun hasn't risen, but already the air feels charged like someone left the oven door cracked open all night. The walls of your home, if you can call it that, are made of woven reed mats patched with mud. No windows, no insulation, just a screen that lets in the first rays of light and every sound from outside. Somewhere in the distance, someone coughs, a donkey brays, a chicken rustles in the dust, a baby cries, thin and far away. Life begins early here because it has no choice. You sit up, your spine cracks in two places, and you realize just how hard this bed really is. Your hands instinctively brush off your tunic linen, stiff with salt and smear grit across your thighs. The dust isn't just on the ground, it's in the air, in your lungs, under your fingernails, in your teeth. And then you feel it, the warmth creeping in. Not comfort warmth, not the kind that hugs your bones and says good morning. No, this warmth is aggressive. It presses against you like a second skin, the kind of heat that doesn't ask permission. It takes. You squint toward the doorway, or the gap where a door should be. Light is leaking in, growing brighter by the second. The sun is just rising. It's charging in, like it owns the place. You step outside. Immediately, your feet sting. The ground is cracked, sun-baked. Even before full daylight irradiates yesterday's heat, you shuffle to avoid stepping on sharp rocks. Sand fills the space between your toes. Your linen tunic flaps weakly, doing nothing to keep you cool. There's no morning routine here, no toothbrush, no cold shower, no podcast gently telling you to set an intention for the day. Your intention is survival. That's it. The only metric that matters. You look around and realize everyone else has already been up. Some for hours. Children chase chickens. Women haul clay pots on their shoulders. Men sun-darkened. Silentere already marching toward the fields. Tools slung over their backs like weapons. No one complains. No one asks how you slept. That kind of luxury, the polite lie that everything's fine, is a modern invention. Here, there's no time to pretend. Your body is a tool. Your work is the point. And comfort. Comfort is for the afterlife. You try to drink. The water sits in a bowl carved from limestone, covered with a thin cloth to keep out flies. It's warmer than you expected and tastes faintly of metal. Still, you swallow. Hydration isn't pleasant. It's necessary. You won't get another chance until the sun is high and your mouth feels like a linen rag. A part of you wants to lie back down, just for a minute. Surely there's more sleep to be had. But the moment you pause, the heat tightens its grip. Sweat collects under your arms, behind your knees, along your spine. The longer you sit, the more your body stews. You haven't eaten yet. You haven't spoken. You haven't done anything, really, and already. You feel spent. You glance toward the river. The Nile glints gold in the distance. Romantic. Yes. Mythical. Maybe. But you know what else it is filthy? Fast. Swarming with life that wants to eat you, infect you, or both. It looks peaceful from here, but you've heard the stories. Bodies float there sometimes. Animals too. And in the heat of the afternoon, it smells like a wound. Back in your reed hut, a fly lands on your lip. You swat it away, only for another to buzz near your ear. The sound is sharp, familiar, relentless. They are everywhere. Flies, beetles, mosquitoes the size of thumbnails. You're not alone in this body. Everything wants a piece of you. And this is the easy part. This is the first 10 minutes of your new life in ancient Egypt. No back pain remedies, no ergonomic furniture, no cool glass of almond milk waiting in a stainless steel fridge, no iced coffee, no stretch, no schedule, just daylight and duty. The day's already slipping forward without you, and if you don't keep up, you'll be left in the dust literally. You take a breath, if you can call it that. The air is thick, hot, and somehow dry and damp at the same time. Your tongue sticks to the roof of your mouth. The back of your neck feels like it's burning. And the sun, it's not just shining, it's attacking. You wouldn't last a sunrise, but let's pretend you will. Just a little longer. Let's see what happens next. The hut is still dim, but the light is starting to throb behind the reeds like a heartbeat. You blink against it, hoping it's a false dawn, some trick of clouds or mist. But there are no clouds in Egypt not this time of year, and mist is for places that remember how to be gentle. Here, morning arrives like a sentence. The reeds that make up your walls were once flexible, fragrant stalks gathered from the riverbank, dried in bundles and tied with care. Now, they're brittle, warped, and baked bone dry by years of desert heat. They creak softly when the wind moves outside, but offer no defense against it, or against anything else, really. There's no door. Just a woven mat rolled halfway down like a shrug of indifference. The sun is already pushing through the gaps between the reeds in long, slanted knives of gold, illuminating the dust suspended in the air. It doesn't just shine, it inspects, it judges. You shift on the mat and feel a sharp pebble press into your hip. Another under your knee. You sit up, and the linen clings warm, moist, and slightly gritty from the fine layer of sand that coats everything, always. Your tunic, meant to be light and breathable, has absorbed your sweat and now hugs you like a damp napkin. No cooling, no comfort. Just a reminder that cotton hasn't been invented yet and personal fans are still 3,000 years in the future. You stand, ducking slightly to avoid the low doorway, and instantly regret it. Your head passes through the last trace of morning shade and into direct sunlight, and it's like sticking your face into a kiln. You can feel your skin tighten, as if it's trying to shrink away from the light. There's no escaping it. No shaded patio, no porch swing with a mug of coffee, no soft robe and crossword puzzle. Just this open exposure, the sky watching you. The sun rising higher like an overseer about to yell, and it's not even 7 or 8. You shuffle to the corner of the hut where a broken shard of pottery holds your morning supplies. A splash of water in a reused beer jar, a stale heel of barley bread, a bit of linen to wrap your head. You dip the cloth in the water, wring it out, and press it to your forehead. For 3 seconds, it's a blessing. Then it warms to your skin and becomes another layer of sweat. There are no curtains here, no relief, just judgmental sunshine. You glance across the open compound. The reed huts sit clustered like forgotten beehives, their occupants already emerging like ants from a disturbed nest. They don't stretch or yawn. There's no time for ceremony. Some carry woven baskets, others balance tools on their heads. Children chase chickens with more energy than seems legal. Everyone's dressed like your loose linen tunics, sun-darkened skin, bare feet hardened into leather soles. But unlike you, they move with purpose, muscle memory. There's no hesitation, no pause for inspiration or caffeine. You step outside fully and feel the dust cling to your legs. It's fine, powdery, the kind that floats before it settles, coating every surface, lining your nose, grinding between your molars when you swallow. Already, you've begun to sweat again, not the clean, glistening kind shown in sports commercials. This sweat is sticky, stubborn. It clings to your ribs and trickles down your spine, pooling where your tunic bunches, and still, the sun rises higher. It's not just the heat, it's the dryness, a parched silence that creeps into your throat, cracks your lips, and makes your eyes feel scratchy. You haven't even walked anywhere yet, but your body is already filing complaints with your nervous system. Back home, your real home, the one with insulation and options morning, is a ramp, something you ease into, a thermostat-controlled, oat milk latte-scented kind of ritual. Here it's a launch pad covered in hot coals. A dog trots past, ribs visible, tongue lolling sideways. A woman yells at her son for forgetting the basket. A neighbour waves without smiling. And you're just standing there, trying not to melt. You consider going back inside, maybe lying down for a few more minutes. But your hut is no sanctuary. The roof is low, the walls hold heat like ceramic bowls, and inside the air barely moves. It's an oven with a pillow. Maybe. You'd think the linen would help. Light, airy, natural. But linen doesn't breathe here. It suffocates. It traps the heat and sticks like plastic wrapped to your skin. You try lifting it, letting air pass under, but all that does is remind you there is no cool air to be found. You think of your closet back home, breathable fabrics, moisture-wicking blends, smart garments that know how to dry. Here, the only thing your clothes know how to do is cling. At the back of the compound, a man is swatting flies off a clay jar. Nearby, an old woman fans a baby with a bundle of dried herbs. The child's eyes are swollen. The fan moves slow. Nobody complains. It's just morning. Your feet are now dusty, your neck already pinking under the relentless sky. The light has changed from gentle dawn to full interrogation. The shadows are shrinking, the heat building, and you haven't even started the day's real work. You wouldn't last a morning. This isn't poetic. This isn't National Geographic. This is 118 degrees by 9A, NEM. This is grit in your nose, sweat in your eyes, and linen that's given up. No curtains, no relief, just judgmental sunshine, and the knowledge that you still have 12 hours to go. You're standing outside your hut, squinting up at the morning sky like it owes you an apology. It doesn't. In fact, it offers something much worse: full, unfiltered sunlight, already crawling across your shoulders like it's trying to peel your skin off with a magnifying glass. You can feel it happening slow at first, but certain, the moment when your paws start to whisper for help. Back home, this would be the cue. You'd reach for a bottle, SPF 50, broad spectrum, water-resistant, hypoallergenic, a clean white lotion that smells faintly of coconut or zinc and promises you at least 2 worry-free hours. But here you ask around, timidly, gesture to your burning skin, mime shade, point at the sky. The locals nod. They understand exactly what you mean. They hand you a jar. At first, you're hopeful. Maybe this is some miracle oil passed down through generations. Some blend of crushed papyrus, sacred herbs, river water, and powdered shell. Something artisanal, holistic, natural. In a way, it is. You take off the lid, and the smell hits you like a sandbag to the chest. Thick, pungent, animal. You peer inside. It's brown. Not oaky or earthy brown. Not chocolate or cinnamon brown. It's the kind of brown that makes your gut instinct recoil. There's no mistake. It's dung, crocodile dung. You hold it up, incredulous, hoping this is a prank. Maybe it's a misunderstanding. Maybe apply means something else in this language. But no, someone is already gesturing to their own cheeks, rubbing it on like it's part of their routine. They smile, their skin flawless. Tanned, yes, but not blistered. Not raw, not peeling like yours is about to be. You hesitate. You stall. You consider your options: sunburn that peels like papyrus scrolls or this. And so you do what any reasonable time traveler would do when their survival instincts override their pride. You take a fingertip's worth and dab it on your face. Warm, gritty, slightly damp in a way that defies logic. It goes on thick and doesn't rub in so much as smear. Your skin instantly feels both protected and violated. Yes, that's crocodile dung. Yes, it's working. The irony is staggering. Civilization along the Nile built pyramids with mathematical precision. They embalmed bodies with tools more delicate than a surgeon's. They understood astronomy, agriculture, irrigation, even rudimentary surgery. And yet, when it came to skin care, this was the solution. You look around again. More villagers apply it casually, like sunscreen from a tube. A woman paints it in delicate lines along her shoulders. A man dots it along his nose and forehead. It isn't just accepted, it's normalized. You try not to inhale. There's a strange comfort in the ritual, though, a moment of shared absurdity. You, a modern mind in ancient linen, crouched beside a clay jar of reptile excrement, patting your face while the sun slowly turns the entire courtyard into a frying pan. A chicken struts by and pauses to look at you. It tilts its head, judgmental. You realize even the livestock has better heat tolerance than you. You shuffle back into a thin patch of shade beneath a fig tree. It's not real shade, just a filtered version of suffering. But at least the direct sun is broken up by moving leaves, and that's something. You sit and press the back of your hand to your cheek. Cooler, slightly. Maybe the dung forms a physical barrier. Maybe the ammonia content repels insects. Maybe it's a placebo. You don't care. At this point, it's your only defense. And now that you've committed to the ritual, you may as well go all in. You scoop out another fingertip, rubbing it onto the back of your neck, then your arms, behind your ears. You're officially a believer now, a reluctant, disgusted, grateful believer. The heat continues its assault. You wipe your hands on your tunic, which already smells like riverbank and old bread, so this doesn't make it worse. You'll wash later. Maybe, if the river allows. Someone sits beside you, a boy, maybe 12. His skin is dark and perfect. No burns, no blemishes. He carries a pot of the same mixture and gestures to offer you more. You shake your head. He grins. He doesn't laugh at you. He doesn't need to. You both know the truth. You wouldn't last a sunburn. He gets up and runs off into the light like it's nothing. You sit, steaming in your own skin, trying to remember what aloe vera feels like. You think of your past life. Bottled comforts, cooling gels, moisturizers in climate-controlled bathrooms, the spa aisle at the drugstore. None of that exists here. And yet, they cope. They adapt. They thrive. With crocodile dung, you glance down at your arms, which still smell like a compost pile near a reptile enclosure. But they're not burning anymore. You touch your forehead again. No sting, no prickling tightness, just a thin layer of repellent magic, courtesy of the Nile's most feared predator. The sun continues to rise, but you remain where you are, refusing to give it the satisfaction of watching you suffer further. You take a slow breath, letting the swampy aroma of your new skincare regime wash over you. There is no dignity in this moment, but there is a strange kind of resilience. And perhaps that's the point. Maybe civilization isn't about perfection. It's about making something, anything, work. Even if it smells like death and sticks to your eyebrows. Even if it makes you question every choice that led to this exact second. Even if your 21st century pride is melting faster than the dung on your cheeks. You shift, stand, and step into the sun again. It's just as hot. Just as blinding. But now you are covered, armored, in the weirdest possible way. The Nile glints behind you. The reed huts hum with activity. Somewhere, a baby laughs. Somewhere else, a donkey groans. And you've survived the worst of it. Until tomorrow. Because make no mistake, you wouldn't last a sunburn. But today, just for now, you did. By mid-morning, your skin feels like it's been lacquered. Not with oil, or sweat even, but with a layer of everything: dust, dung, humidity, and whatever's rising off your own body that nobody wants to name. You feel filmy, like a window that's never been wiped. You itch in places you forgot had nerve endings. The only solution, they say, is a bath. You follow a small group down a dry path that curves toward the river. The air is thick with flies. They cling to your arms, your neck, your ear steiny, insistent and impossible to swat. You're not sweating anymore. Your skin has given up on that. Now, you're just simmering. As you approach the Nile, the first thing that hits you isn't the view, it's the smell. You expected something cleaner, fresher. The great river of civilization, after all, a source of life, center of myth. What you get instead is a kind of sour, vegetal funk-qual parts rotting plant, wet silt, and old fish. There's a layer of foam hugging the shore like a sleeping animal. Lazy and opaque, mosquitoes dance above it in formation. But this is the bath. This is what's available. You step closer and catch movement in the shallows. A slick tail, a flicker of scales. Your body stiffens. You don't want to ask, but someone sees your hesitation and grins. Crocodile, they say. They say it casually, like someone mentioning rain or traffic, or that there might be a little soap left in the bottle if you shake it. You ask, gently, if this is safe. The answer is a shrug. They're not hungry right now. That's not a comfort. The group begins undressing, if you can call it that. They peel off tunics, unwrap their headcloths, step barefoot into the water like it's just another part of the day. Some carry small woven pouches. Others have what looks like smooth stones. You try not to stare. There's no awkwardness here. No shame. Just necessity. You step in. The mud grabs you first. Between your toes, up your heels, around your ankles, it sucks and pulls like something alive. The water itself is warm, not refreshing warm, not spa warm, more like tea forgotten in a clay cup, just hot enough to disappoint. The shore disappears beneath you after a few steps. The mud thickens, your balance wavers, something brushes your calf. You freeze. It could be a plant, it could be a fish, it could be death in the form of a smiling reptile. But no one else reacts. The current pulls softly, whispering against your knees, thighs, waist. Now you're in. There is no soap, no lavender, no foaming cleanser. You bend down and scoop a handful of river water, bringing it to your shoulders, trying to scrub. It feels more like rubbing in the grime than removing it. There's a film to the water. It coats you as much as it cleans. You remember the pouch you saw one man carrying. You watch as he opens it and pours something into his hand. Sand. He scrubs it along his arms like an exfoliant. You do the same. You reach to the riverbed, gather a gritty handful, and begin to scrape. Your skin reddens instantly. The sand is fine, yes, but brutal. It doesn't glide. It scratches, carves, polishes you into something less soft. The smell clings. You try to ignore it. You duck under, once. The water floods your ears, your nose. When you come up, the world sounds far away. You spit out what tastes like clay and old onion. A woman nearby coughs and blows her nose into the water. You try not to think about it. You look downstream. A group of men is washing clothes. Not far from them. Someone is defecating. Everything flows in a one direction. There is no clean part of the Nile, just upstream and less upstream. And still, this is cleaner than how you felt before. You notice your feet now, the soles, raw from walking, cracked, filthy. Even here, immersed in silt and river gunk, they look darker than the water, like they've absorbed centuries of road. You scoop another handful of sand and scrub harder. The dead skin rolls off in thin grey curls. You keep going until it stings. You wouldn't last a wash. Back home, a shower is a kind of baptism, a reset button, steam and pressure and vanilla-scented foams. Here, it's a daily struggle against decay. You don't wash to feel good. You wash to not get worse. You look up. Flies still hover above the water. A dead fish floats past, bloated and smiling. You make eye contact. You look away. And yet, when you step out, dripping and scraped and smelling vaguely like wet grass and defeat, you feel something that resembles relief. Your skin, though raw, no longer burns. The breeze feels different. A boy tosses you a piece of linen to dry off. You catch it mid-air. Grateful. You rub down quickly. The cloth is rough and smells of last week's bath. You don't care. Still cleaner than your feet. Back on land, you stand in the sun, letting it evaporate the river from your skin. You're half-baked, half-boiled. The feeling is strange. Not clean, exactly, but not unclean either. More like scoured. Your feet crunch over dry earth as you walk. A line of ants flees beneath your step. You're back in your own skin, but it feels unfamiliar, like someone else's shirt you're not used to wearing. You glance back at the Nile. The foam still hugs the banks. The crocodiles, invisible, are somewhere beneath. And your body, for now, is reset, not refreshed, not renewed, just less foul. It'll do, because in this world, that's the win. You wouldn't last a wash, but today, you did. Your skin is still damp from the Nile. Your arms carry a faint itch where the sand scoured them raw, and your nose won't stop registering the ghost of river rot. But the worst has passed, for now, because next comes the first real reward of the day breakfast. That is, if you can call it that, You follow the smell of smoke-tree reeds, mostly, with a hint of charred grain, and join the quiet procession back toward the center of the compound. No one talks. The silence isn't reverent. It's tired. Everyone's conserving energy, already rationing their breath before the sun rises any higher. In a shaded clearing between huts, someone crouches beside a flat stone hearth. A pot bubbles over a coal bed that glows like old anger. Two women take turns slapping dough between their palms, round, flat, quick, and laying it on a slab that's been heating since before dawn. It sizzles, blackens at the edge. Curling smoke carries the first scent of food you've had today. You're handed a piece of bread. You take it with both hands, careful not to drop it. It's still warm. It smells faintly of ash and old wheat. It looks promising, familiar, even. Then you bite. The crust resists. So does the middle. It's not bread the way you know it. Not fluffy, not soft, not even dense in a hearty, farmhouse kind of way. Now this is geological. The first chew barely makes a dent. You try again, jaw straining. The crust grates against your teeth like someone baked the concept of a sidewalk. Someone nearby catches your expression and grins. Bon appetit, he says, chewing calmly. Now chew through the rock. You smile back weakly, trying to find the humor. But the reality is your jaw is already protesting, your molars screaming, and you've only managed a corner. Still, you're hungry. You keep going. The inside, once you reach it, is sour. Not unpleasant, just surprising. A reminder that yeast here isn't measured in neat foil packets. It's wild, fermented, alive, like everything else in this place. Alongside the bread comes a small clay cup, filled to the brim with something thick and beige. You assume it's some kind of soup. You assume wrong. This is beer, not the crisp, bubbly kind you sip after mowing the lawn. Not the golden, foamy pint that pairs with wings or plays on Super Bowl ads. This is porridge, liquid bread, grainy, warm, with bits that swirl like confetti on a bad day. It smells like sourdough, and river water had a disagreement. You tilt the cup and take a sip. It coats your tongue like a paste. You wince. It's not bad exactly, just earnest, nutritional, heavy, the beer of survivors. And then come the flies. They appear all at once, as if summoned by your discomfort. Dozens, maybe hundreds, drawn by the sugar in the brew or the sweat on your arms or the sheer audacity of human presence. They land on your cup, on your bread, on your face. You swat at them with one hand while trying not to spill your only source of calories with the other. No one else seems bothered. A child balances a slice of fish on a bit of flatbread, casually shooing flies with a stick. A woman sips her beer porridge and lets one crawl along her wrist. It's as if they've all struck some silent bargain with the insects ignore them, and they'll only half devour you. You haven't made that deal. Not yet. You relocate to a corner of the courtyard, away from the hearth, where the air moves slightly. Here, at least, the flies thin out. You return to the business of eating, another bite of bread, another swallow of sludge, and slowly, something strange happens. You start to feel full, not satisfied, not delighted, but physically occupied. The grain expands in your belly, the beer sits heavy, the bread, though cruel, is fuel. The flies keep coming, but you learn to let them land, flick them away with the back of a knuckle, and keep chewing. This is breakfast. This is all there is, and in a way it's enough. You lean back against a clay wall and take a deep breath. The air is still hot. The dust is still rising. Your back aches. Your jaw aches. Your stomach mutters, unsure of what it's just been given. But you've made it through. For now, you watch the others. Some nap on mats, bellies rising and falling in sync. Others pack tools, preparing for the day's work farming, hauling, cleaning, walking miles for water. Children chase each other between the huts, barefoot and cackling, a blur of elbows and dust. The village is waking up in full. You sit in the shade, hands limp in your lap, and you think, at least it's safer than the water. You wouldn't last a meal, not the way they do, not without complaining, not without a menu, not without at least a napkin. But here you are, fed, drenched in sweat, stained with Nile, and still standing. You finish the last of the beer, swish the sediment at the bottom. Drink it anyway. Then you crunch the edge of the bread again. Still warm, still hard, still cleaner than your feet. There's no bell, no whistle, no clock striking the hour. The signal is simpler. The sun rises past the tree line and scorches the top of your head. That's when the villagers begin to move. That's when work begins. You'd hoped for a break after breakfast. Just a moment. A breath. But rest is not part of the rhythm here. Not in this season. Not in this heat. Tools appear from shadows worn wooden hose, baskets of twine, smooth stones once used by someone's great-grandfather. No one asks if you're ready. No one needs to. The assumption is you are alive, and therefore you work. A man hands you a digging stick. It's as tall as your chest and stained with time. The handle is smooth where 1,000 palms have worn it down. It smells faintly of sweat and soil. You accept it without question. There's no option to say no. The group begins the walk to the fields. It's not far, but the path is dry and uneven, scattered with stones that jab at the soles of your feet. The air shimmers ahead like it's hiding something. The Nile glints to your right, indifferent to your struggle. Every step kicks up dust. Your legs itch from the sand still trapped in the folds of your linen. The sun has turned from hot to hostile, and the work hasn't even started. You arrive at a stretch of land lined with irrigation ditches, small trenches carved out and refilled day after day by hand. No machines, no pumps, just muscle, will and time. Someone points at a patch of earth. Your patch. The digging begins. The soil is packed. It's not dry, but dense, thick with silt, root, and old heat. Your stick punches through it only with effort. The movement is awkward at first. Lift, stab, lever, lift again. Your back curves in protest. Your shoulders complain. Sweat drips from your chin after just 5 minutes. 10 minutes in, your breath is uneven. 15, and you're soaking. You look up, hoping to catch someone else pausing, or no one has. The man beside you is twice your age and moves like a machine. His arms are thin but wiry. His back never straightens. His gaze never lifts. Each movement is efficient, rhythmic. Yours are clumsy in comparison, hesitant, wasteful. The digging stick slips. You adjust your grip. It slips again. You keep going. There are no breaks. You want water. You want shade. You want a chair, a complaint box, a moment. But all you get is more dirt, more sun, more sweat. You shift your feet. The earth crumbles under them. A cloud of dust rises and clings to your skin, mingling with sweat until you look and feel like a clay sculpture slowly melting. A fly lands on your eyelid. You don't swat it. You don't have the energy. This continues for hours. No one checks the time. Time doesn't matter. Only progress. You learn to breathe shallow through your nose to avoid choking on your own salt. You learn to adjust your stance every few minutes to avoid cramps. You learn, slowly, to work like they dare without pride, without resistance, without the need for meaning. This isn't a career. It's not a passion. It's obligation. It's duty. It's survival. At some point, you stop thinking in words. There's just motion. Forward, down, lift, turn. Your tunic is soaked through. Your back burns. The crook of your elbow stings from sun and friction. The digging stick is now part of your hand. You wouldn't notice if it splintered. You wouldn't notice if you bled. You glance up hoping for a signal, a gesture, anything. Instead, someone hands you a basket. You've dug the trench. Now you'll gather the loose earth and carry it, one handful at a time. You move like a ghost. The basket is heavy and awkward. It scratches against your hip. You make it 20 feet before your legs tremble. You keep going. On the third trip, your foot catches a rock. You stumble. You don't fall. But the pain shoots through your knee like lightning. No one sees. Or if they do, they say nothing. This is the rule. You don't stop. You don't slow. You don't resist. You wouldn't last a shift. Around midday, the light changes. Not dimmer, just crueler. The angle shifts, and the shadows you'd relied on vanish. You're fully exposed now, baking in a way that feels personal. Still, no one calls a break. Still, you carry, dig, carry, dump. Eventually, someone passes a jar. You drink. The water is warm. but wet. It smells faintly of clay. You drink anyway, a lot, too fast. It sloshes in your gut as you bend. You don't care, because sweat is your job now. Every part of you aches, your muscles, your joints, your bones, but also stranger things. The space behind your knees, the arches of your feet, the small, tender spot where your ear meets your jaw. You feel the sun in your teeth, and yet you're still moving, you're still working, because there is no choice. You reach the end of your row. Someone marks it with a stick. Another person steps in to begin planting. You don't stay to see it. You're already being pointed toward a new trench, a new burden, and though your body is screaming, your hands are moving again. Dig, lift, carry, repeat. You think of your old job, your desk, your keyboard, your coffee mug with the chip in the handle. You remember sighing when meetings ran long. You remember complaining about Mondays. You remember luxury. This is different. This is not boredom, this is not stress, and this is labor. By the time a pause is granted, it's not announced, it simply happens. One man stops and sits, then another, then you. You drop your stick, you fall beside it, you stare at the dirt you've moved. It's not much, it's everything. You wipe your forehead with the back of your wrist and find only more sweat. It drips down your spine like guilt. You close your eyes and think you wouldn't last a shift, but somehow you just did. They take you north this time, past the fields, past the oxen, past the green stripe of farmland that hugs the river like a secret. The air dries out the farther you go, the wind picks up, the sun, if it's possible, grows bolder, and then you see them. Not pyramids yet. First, the quarry. It looks like a scar in the earth, a wound held open by the labour of hundreds of bodies. The sound hits you before the dust does stone on stone, shouted orders, the creak of ropes and the dull thud of chisels echoing into the pit like an ancient heartbeat. You're not building your own house here. You're building eternity. Someone hands you a hammer stone, rounded, heavy, warm already from the sun. There's a line of others ahead of you, shoulders bent, faces blank, chipping away at a block the size of a house. This isn't sculpting. This is demolition in reverse. You're helping birth a temple, a tomb, a monument. They don't tell you what it will be. They don't need to. It's for the pharaoh. And that means one thing: perfection. Not good enough. Not close. Perfection. Because if you chip the wrong angle, if the stone fractures wrong, if your chisel marks show in the wrong light, you might not go home. They'll bury you where you stand. Literally. There are bones in this quarry. You've seen them. A femur half covered in dust. A tooth in the crack between slabs. You want to believe they're old, really old. From accidents. From other times. But someone nearby glances at them and doesn't flinch. That tells you everything. There's no joke here. This isn't labour for the sake of food or irrigation. This is labour for the sake of heaven. The pharaoh isn't a man. Not really. Not to them. He's the son of Ra, the living god. To question his tomb design is to question divinity itself. To question your orders, that's blasphemy. So you chip. You don't know how. Your hands don't know the angle. But they learn quickly. After the second time, you strike too hard and send a crack running down the edge of the block. A supervisor stares at you in a way that empties your lungs. No yelling, just silence. A silence you never want to hear again. You keep your head down. You mimic the man next to you, elbow bent, shoulders loose, angle precise. He moves like someone who's already forgotten his name, who only remembers weight, pressure, and heat. The hours dissolve into one another. Sweat pools in your eyes. Your palms blister beneath the stone handle. You swap hands, you rotate grips, but there's no relief, and all the while, dust climbs into your throat. Fine, dry, invasive. You taste stone now. You breathe stone. It's in your nose, your hair, your fingernails. You want water. You want a breeze. You want this to be a bad dream. Instead, the supervisor passes again. He doesn't speak. He watches. You chip slower. Not because you're tired, though you are, but because now you understand you're not working stone. You're worshipping. Every strike is a prayer, every flake of rock an offering, every mistake a sin. You ask what the tomb will look like. Someone near you shrugs. That's not your concern. Your concern is this one block in a wall of blocks, in a hall of blocks, in a pyramid that must outlast wind, flood, and time itself. The pharaoh's name must be remembered. So must yours in silence. You hear a shout. A man is pulled from the line. Something went wrong. A chip too deep. A corner lost. He protests just once and then he's gone. You don't see where. You don't ask. You keep chipping. Even your tomb might get you killed. Later, when the sun has cooked your back and dried your tongue to bark, they let you rest. Not in shade there is none but against the shadow of the very blocks you've helped prepare. The stone is cool on one side. You press your cheek to it and breathe. It smells like dust. It smells like fear. You imagine the inside of the tomb this will form. Cool, dark, lined with gold and limestone and paintings of gods walking sideways. You imagine the pharaoh lying beneath a painted ceiling of stars while the men who shaped it vanished from history like smoke. No one will know you chipped this block. That's the point. You're not supposed to be remembered. Only the pharaoh is eternal. A breeze passes. It kicks up a swirl of powdered sandstone. You close your eyes. You don't cough. You don't blink. You let it settle. You think of home, of beds, of coffee, of weekends, of projects that had deadlines and rewards and emails that said good work. This is not that. This project has no end. Only stone, only sun, only silence. You think you wouldn't last a project, but then you feel your hand tighten around the hammerstone again, and you lift it, and chip again. Because here, sweat is worship, and breath is borrowed, and every strike says, I serve. At first, it's just a pinch in your sandal, a pebble, maybe, a nuisance. You stop, shake your foot, it's gone. Then it comes back, on the other foot this time. You don't stop again. You learn fast. Sand is not a visitor here. It's not something to wipe away or vacuum up. It's not the result of a beach day or a windy trail. It's the air itself. It's what you breathe. It's what scratches your throat when you speak. Sand gets in first thing in the morning. Before your eyes open, it's in the crease of your elbow, in your mouth. It has arrived before you've even moved. It's in your bedding woven reeds that do nothing to stop it. You roll over, and it grinds into your shoulder, your ear, your scalp. You spit, grit, you blink, scratch, and the day hasn't even begun. By breakfast, you're chewing more than bread. There's always a crunch now, even in the beer porridge, especially in the beer porridge. You pretend it's just grain, but you know, that texture isn't wheat. It's dust, baked into every surface, riding the backs of flies, hiding in folds of cloth. You try covering your cup. The flies win. The sand sneaks through. You try eating faster. You choke. It's in the food, and that's just how it is. You wouldn't last a breeze. By midday, your skin is raw not from the sun, not from labour, not even from the rough linen that rubs your ribs every time you bend, but from the wind. The endless whispering, sand-carrying wind. It doesn't howl. It doesn't gust. It just moves. Constantly. Quietly. Like an ancient god with nothing better to do than file you down, grain by grain, until you forget what it felt like to be smooth. You rub your arm and watch a layer of dust come off. Underneath, more dust. A rash is starting at your wrist, where your sweat dries into salt and the sand glues itself to the crystals. You're not exfoliating. You're disintegrating. Even when you wash, when the Nile is your bath and the sand is scoured from your legs, you know it's not over. Because the walk back from the river will coat you again. Because the towel is already coated. Because the breeze will follow. It always follows. You try to protect your eyes. You fashion a makeshift wrap from a strip of cloth. The fabric scratches. You see less. You trip more. And still, the sand gets in. You blink. Blink again. Each time, it's like dragging a stone across a window pane. You squint, trying to keep your gaze down, but your eyelashes, noble little soldiers, are already overwhelmed. By noon, your eyes burn, you tear up. The tears make the sand stick harder. It's a cruel irony. The more your body tries to flush it out, the deeper it burrows in. You're not blinking anymore. You're wincing. A child offers you a salve something her grandmother made. Crushed herbs and goat fat. It smells like vinegar and smoke. You smear it on, and it helps. A little. For an hour. Then the sand returns. Of course it does, because there's no outside here. No sealed homes, no closed windows, just open walls, open roofs, the open mouth of the desert exhaling endlessly into your life. You've stopped asking how it gets in. You've started asking, is there anywhere it isn't? And the answer, every time, is no. There's sand in the cooking pots, sand in your hair, sand in places you forgot had names. Even the chickens kick it up with every step. The goats roll in it like they enjoy it. They probably do. They were born for this. You weren't. You're unraveling. The itch becomes background noise. Then it becomes pain. Then, worse, it becomes identity. You start thinking of yourself not as a person, but as a person-shaped sack of dust, a walking tomb, slowly filling before you're even dead. That night, you lie down again on your mat. You dust it off first again, but it makes no difference. You lie down, you turn to one side, grit in your armpit, turn to the other, grit in your ear, face up, grit on your eyelids. You finally settle, you sleep, and then you dream of glass, of being ground into powder, of wind moving through you until nothing's left. And still, the sand doesn't stop. The next morning, you cough, a dry rasp. You spit into the dust. It's brown. You rinse your mouth with warm water. Grit again. You try not to gag. It's just how things are. You wouldn't last a breeze. You know that now. But here's the strangest thing: by day 3, you stop noticing. Not because the sand is gone, but because you've adapted. The skin between your fingers calluses. Your nostrils flare wider. You walk differently heels first, avoiding the drifts, stepping around the soft piles like you're dancing. It's not grace. It's surrender. You no longer fight the sand. You walk with it. You eat it. You sleep in it. And when the wind shifts, you don't flinch. You just turn your face, close one eye, and keep moving. Because here, even the dust teaches you something. Everything changes, slowly, patiently, invisibly, until one day, you're someone else entirely. You wake to smoke, not fire incense, thick and sweet. It crawls through the doorway and coils over your face like a silk ribbon. You blink it away and sit up, and the world is already different. Quieter, heavier, watching. Outside, the villagers are moving toward the temple, if you can call it that. It's not grand like the ones you imagined. No soaring pillars or gold-plated statues. It's a single room, mud brick, built low against the rising wind. The doorway is narrow, the roof leaks, but the air around it crackles. Not with heat, with presence. No one told you this was required. No one had to. You follow the others barefoot across the hot dirt. Everyone is silent. Children don't squirm. Even the goats are still. One woman carries a jug of beer in both hands, eyes down. A man has drawn a thin line of ash across his brow. A girl clutches a bundle of reeds tight to her chest like a sacred offering. They're not headed to a performance. They're headed to confession. Inside, it's darker than it should be. The windows are high and small, shaped like keyholes, and the sun barely makes it in. The smoke hangs low. It smells of crushed myrrh and something bitter-burnt onion, maybe. The walls are painted flat figures of men with heads of birds, women with stars in their hair, jackals bearing blades. They aren't decorations. They're witnesses. The priest enters last. His feet are bare, his skin oiled. His robe is simple white linen streaked with rust-coloured dye. No one looks directly at him. He doesn't speak at first. He just walks the room in a slow circle, dragging a feather behind him like a broom. You recognize the symbol, Mut, the feather of truth. You stand there, unsure what's expected. Everyone else begins murmuring words too soft to hear. Not chants, not songs, just fragments of apology. A man confesses to overwatering his neighbour's field. A woman admits she took too long to bury an animal. A boy says he lied about breaking a jar. You realise something terrible. There's no such thing as privacy here, not even in thought. The gods are watching everything, not just murder or theft or blasphemy, but hesitation, laziness, arrogance, your thoughts, your dreams, your indecision, all of it seen, all of it judged, and all of it, somehow, your fault. You try to stay quiet, to listen, but then the priest stops, in front of you. He holds the feather up. You don't move. He says nothing. But somehow, that's worse. You speak slowly, unsure. You apologize for eating too much, for not thanking the Nile before bathing, for stepping on a beetle and not stopping to bury it. The priest nods once. He moves on. You feel colder than before. No one claps. No one embraces you. There is no forgiveness here, only acknowledgement. You are flawed. And now the gods know. The rituals continue. Offerings are placed in a basin grain, feathers, a cracked egg. Smoke billows again. The priest chants something low, guttural. It doesn't sound human. It doesn't sound meant to be understood. You're told later that even mistakes in the offering can be punished, that if the incense is too dry, or the jar isn't placed at the correct angle, the gods may misinterpret the act. They may think you're mocking them, and then drought, or sickness, or stillbirth. The gods do not forgive carelessness. Faith isn't personal here. It isn't meditative, or uplifting, or a weekend activity. It's constant, practical, enforced. The gods are not kind fathers. They are auditors. Faith is your only insurance. You step outside and the light hurts. The sky feels brighter, but smaller, like the heavens have leaned in too close. You try to shake the feeling, but it clings. You reach for your water jug, but wait. You pour a few drops into the soil before you drink. You look up, whisper thanks. You chew your bread slowly and pause before swallowing. You press your fingers to the ground before resting, just in case someone divine is watching, because they are. They always are. In the days that follow, it becomes second nature. You greet the sun with a bow. You place pebbles at the edge of the river to honor Sobek. You nod to the ibis in the fields, just in case it's Thoth in disguise. You stop scratching your itches too quickly. You step over ants. You murmur blessings over mosquito bites. Because here, sin is granular. 1,000 tiny grains of disrespect that can pile up into a curse, and it's not just you. You see a boy whipped because he failed to bow when the funeral procession passed. You see a woman sob after sneezing during a naming ritual. You hear about a man who was struck blind after laughing too loudly at the temple steps. You don't ask if it's true. You don't care. You pray. You apologize. You hope that works. You wouldn't last a prayer, because even here, in this place of constant work and hunger and heed it, is this that breaks you most. The pressure to be pure, to mean every gesture, to fear every breath. The gods are near, closer than skin. You feel them when the wind shifts. You see them in the cracked wall of the hut where a spider moves in perfect circles. You hear them in the silence between insects. They do not ask you to love them, only to know your place and keep your head bowed. They don't bury you right away. Death is not the end, not here. It's the start of the real trial. Your body is wrapped carefully, slowly, by hands that have done this before. Fingers stained with resin, wrists stiff from repetition. Linen strips soaked in oils that smell like cinnamon and dust. Amulets are tucked beneath the folds, one for each part of your soul. Your name is whispered, your feet are tied. The tomb is not a resting place. It's a waiting room, because after the wrapping, after the weeping, after the final jar is sealed, and the door to your chamber is closed behind the living, you awaken, not in your body, but as something else. The Egyptians called it the Kaor life force, your echo. You blink, or think you do. You're standing in a hall, vast, dark, endless. The ceiling isn't sky, but star-painted, not real, and yet somehow more honest. Beneath your feet is stone smoother than anything you knew in life. Ahead a line of souls, silent, still. And at the far end, a scale, a real one, tall as a man, gleaming with gold. Its beam is perfectly balanced, motionless, patient. To the left of it, a goddess. To the right, a monster. This is the Hall of Two Truths, and your time has come. You move forward, step by step. Your name echoes around you, but no one speaks it. You arrive before the scale. Anubis waits jackal-headed, unreadable. His fingers are delicate as they reach into your chest, not your body, but your essence, and draw forth your heart. It glows faintly. It beats once in his hand, then stills. He places it on one side of the scale. On the other, a single feather. White, weightless. The feather of Mart. Truth, order, cosmic balance. This is not symbolic. This is the test. If your heart is heavier than the feather, you've lied, you've stolen, you've stepped out of harmony with the world, you've broken the contract of decency the gods placed beneath every sunrise. And if that's true, you don't get a second chance. You get lunch. Specifically, you are lunch. Amit sits to the side waiting. The devourer of the dead, part lion, part crocodile, part hippo. The three most dangerous beasts in Egypt, stitched together by myth and teeth. She doesn't growl. She doesn't move. She waits. Because no one escapes her if the scale tips wrong. You remember all the little things. The beetle you crushed. The time you whispered raw with doubt in your throat. The lie about where you got the fish. Did those count? You're not sure. You look at your heart. It flickers. The scale begins to shift. You panic. It's not just weight. The heart responds to memory. It gets heavier the more you regret. The more you fear. Every apology you never said adds mass. Every truth you bent for convenience stains it darker. You try to steady yourself. To think pure thoughts. To unmake your sins with logic. It doesn't work. That's not how this works. Thoth is there too, scribe of the gods, ibis-headed, holding a reed pen. He writes your verdict in a scroll before it's even delivered. There is no appeal, no debate, just outcome. The scale trembles, the heart quivers, one lie, and your lunch. You want to scream, you want to confess, but you already did, in life, and the time to balance that record is over. Now it's just accounting. The feather remains still, your heart still tipping, and then a breath. You didn't take it, the scale did, and it steadies, it balances, just barely. Thoth pauses, Anubis nods. Amit lowers her head in disappointment, and you fall, not down, but forward into light, into mist, into something too beautiful and terrifying to name. Your next journey begins. The fields of reeds wait, or reincarnation, or judgment again. No one tells you. You've passed, but just barely. You wouldn't pass the test, not without that final prayer, that last good deed, that one moment of mercy you gave without thinking it mattered. Turns out, it did. Because here, every act is remembered, not by people, by the universe, and the universe is honest. You sneeze once, just once, and everything stops. The woman beside you gasps and steps back. The boy carrying the grain bundle drops it. An old man whispers something and taps his left foot 3 times, as if striking a hidden drum. You're confused, your nose tickled. There was dust, that's all, until someone hands you honey, not to eat to smear, on your nose, on your eyelids, behind your knees. It draws out the bad winds, they say. You try to laugh, but they're not joking. You've entered a place where medicine is only half logic, the other half hope, luck. A dash of crocodile tail and a chant or two for good measure. It's not science. It's optimism with herbs. You sit in the hut of the local healer. Not a doctor, not quite a priest. Something in between. The walls are covered in woven baskets, each filled with ingredients that defy explanation-dreed fish scales. Papyrus bark, burnt onion, a pinch of mummy powder, real or imagined. You tell her your throat is scratchy. She nods and begins to chant. In a sing-song voice, she names gods Sekhmet for strength, Thoth for wisdom, Bastet for the immune system, or maybe cats, it's hard to tell. Then she spits in a bowl, adds honey, adds coriander, adds milk that is definitely not cold. Then she mixes it with a reed and holds it out like a peace offering. You sip. It tastes like wet bread soaked in sunburn. You try not to gag. Good, she says. Now you won't die. You're not convinced. The next step is more involved. An amulet small. Clay, shaped like a falconis tied around your neck with a cord made from date palm fibre. She tells you to wear it for 3 days. No removing it, not even to sleep. Especially not to sleep. The falcon will fly the sickness away in your dreams. You ask if you should rest. She frowns. Resting invites the illness to get comfortable, she explains. You must confuse it to stay active, sweat it out, walk in zigzags. Recite your mother's name backward. Fast until sundown. Also, avoid fish, unless it's blessed, which it won't be. You obey, because here, disobedience isn't just disrespect, it's dangerous. Skepticism can summon fevers. Sarcasm can sour spells. You hear stories of a man who mocked the goddess of childbirth and developed boils for 9 weeks. of a child who kicked over a water basin during a blessing and grew up with one eye permanently weeping. These aren't punishments, they're consequences. Medicine here is not a clean white lab coat and a clipboard. It's a combination of faith and fermentation. You wouldn't last a sneeze. 2 days later, your cough worsens. She ups the ante. This time, the prescription is a poultice made from fig salt and a bit of lizard blood. You don't ask where the lizard came from. You don't want to know. She smears it over your chest in slow circles, chanting in time with the motion. The room smells like fruit gone wrong. You sweat. A lot. Then you're wrapped in linen, arms pinned to your sides like a mummy in training. You're told to sit very still while the poultice draws out the demon. You do. The demon must be part spider, because it itches like hell. But you endure. At this point, you do anything just to feel normal again. Even drink the next thing she brews some foul-smelling mix of beer, ash, and crushed lotus root. It doesn't help, but it doesn't kill you, which, in this place, counts as a medical success. Later, you meet another paciente man with tooth pain. His treatment, a live mouse pressed against his cheek and tied in place with string. Apparently, mice absorb tooth demons through their whiskers. He swears it worked. You believe him? You have to. Because the truth is something does change. You start to feel better. Your throat eases. Your cough quiets. Whether it was the honey or the chanting or just the passage of time doesn't matter. You got better. And everyone agrees it was the spell. You nod, grateful, humbled. Not because you understand it, but because you've survived it. That night, the healer gives you one last task. She presses a dried locust into your hand. Bury this under the moon, she says. Face east. Don't speak. You ask why. She shrugs. Protection. From what she shrugs again. You bury the locust. You don't speak. You look east. And somewhere in that strange silence, that ridiculous ritual, you find something real relief. Because here, medicine is not just about healing the body. It's about proving to yourself and to the gods that you want to live, and that you're willing to do anything to keep doing so. She wakes before the sun, not because she must, but because no one else will. The rooster hasn't crowed yet. The goats are still asleep. Even the Nile, just a few hundred yards away, feels like it's holding its breath. But she's already up, already stretching the tightness from her back, already listening for the faint creak of reed mats shifting under her children's weight. She starts the fire with practiced ease. Dried dung, some crushed husk, a few sparks struck with flint. Her hands know the motion. Her body knows the rhythm. Her mind is already elsewhere. Grinding, not mentally, literally. She lifts the heavy upper stone and begins the morning ritual. Wheat becomes powder. Powder becomes flour. Flour will soon be dough. The motion is circular, monotonous, and loud. 1,000 circles before breakfast. Her hands no longer blister. They don't even ache anymore. They've simply accepted it. She wipes her brow with her forearm and checks the pot. Still half full from last night's lentils. It'll do. By now, the first baby stirs. A cough. Then a wail. She scoops the child into one arm, never missing a beat with the other hand. Her hip becomes a cradle. Her shoulder becomes a pillow. The child quiets. Another rises. Then another. Then her husband. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. Her movements have become language. And yet, she smiles. Not wide, not bright, but real. It's a smile that says, I've done this before. I'll do it again. Because here, a woman doesn't rest. But she remembers how. She scrubs. She braids. She dresses the smallest child in a tunic patched 5 times. She sharpens the knife used to scale fish. She refills the water jars, one after the other, carried on her head in trips so smooth the water doesn't spill. She doesn't flinch when the donkey kicks too close. She doesn't pause when a beetle crawls over the breadboard. She simply moves, purposeful, relentless. She is not a queen. She is not a priestess. She's not even considered important in the grand annals of temple scrolls. But without her, the household collapses. The field lies fallow. The fire goes cold. She is the pillar no one paints but that every life leans on. They say Egyptian women had rights. And it's true. She can own land. She can testify in court. She can inherit and pass on property. On papyrus. She is freer than many women for the next 3,000 years. But freedom here is not leisure. It is labour. No one stops her from speaking, but no one offers to listen. No one locks her indoors, but there's nowhere to go. Even celebration is work. She prepares for births, for funerals, for weddings. She weaves her own gifts. She makes her own perfume. She helps wash and wrap the dead. She births, grinds, cooks, and still smiles. You wouldn't last a dawn. She sings to herself while scrubbing the basin, a song her mother sang, a song her daughter will one day hum. It's not joyous, but it's not sad either. It simply is, the way the Nile is, the way the sun rises, the way her body remembers when to fetch more reeds before anyone asks. She bleeds once a month and still works the same hours. She bears children and returns to the fields before her stitches fade. She mixes barley and yeast while her newborn sleeps on a sling tied to her chest. She carries the home with hands that no longer shake. The little girl who once played with lotus flowers now kneels at the riverbank, rinsing blood-stained cloth. And yet she still smells of crushed mint and oil when she leans in to kiss her youngest goodnight. She still hums over the stew pot. She still laughs low, quiet, almost like coughing when her husband forgets where the spoons are kept. She remembers herself, too. At night, she traces coal around her eyes, not for anyone else, for her. A small act of rebellion, or remembrance, that she is more than function. She is woman. And in this world, that means everything and nothing. She once dreamed of being a dancer, of weaving silk, of reading in the temple libraries, but dreams don't cook lentils. Dreams don't hold toddlers. Dreams don't chop onions with sunburnt hands while the fire smokes and the neighbours argue about stolen chickens. So she lets the dreams sleep. They'll still be there when she wakes tomorrow. The gods may not know her name, but the ground does. The walls of the hut remember her footsteps. The children copy the way she folds linen. The old women nod when she passes. She belongs here, not because she was told to, but because she built it, one dawn at a time. You see it in the eyes first, that look distant, accepting, almost serene. Not because death is beautiful, not because it's easy, but because, for most here, it is expected, anticipated, budgeted for. You can't just die in ancient Egypt. You have to prepare for it. Dying is easy. Getting buried right is hard. If you're wealthy, death comes with ceremony priests, oils, prayers, a painted sarcophagus, a golden mask. You get music, mourners, jars carved from alabaster. You get a pyramid, maybe, or at least a clean stone wall with your name etched carefully so the gods can read it. But you're not wealthy. You're a farmer, or a brickmaker, a weaver's apprentice. And when you die, it won't be on polished tiles surrounded by lamplight and incense. It'll be on a mat, in a corner, maybe mid-sentence, your breath slipping out between mouthfuls of beer-soaked bread. And still you hope, because everyone, no matter how poor, dreams of the field of reeds, a version of paradise where the crops grow tall and never rot, where your limbs are strong again, your stomach never aches, your favourite dog is waiting tail wagging, eyes unblinking. But there are rules. You must be buried properly. You must have your name spoken, your heart weighed, your body preserved, even just enough to be recognised on the other side. If not, you vanish. Your soul dissolves like salt in the Nile. So from the day you understand what death means, you start saving. Not for wine, not for shoes, for linen, for resin, for a spot in the shade. You collect coins, not to spend on sweets, but to bribe the embalmers to use clean tools. You practice hymns under your breath while grinding grain. You choose your amulets early, one for guidance, one for protection, one just in case neither of those works. And still, you might not make it, because if you're too poor, you won't be embalmed. You'll be wrapped in old cloth and placed in a shallow pit, sometimes not even sealed with stone. Sand will cover you like a blanket you didn't ask for. There will be no priest, no feather, no heart weighing, just silence, and the slow, dry forgetting of time. You wouldn't last the funeral, but you still plan for one, because hope, here, is stubborn. You ask a friend to remember your name. You teach your daughter to whisper a prayer at your feet if you die too soon. You store away a tiny scarab worthless to some, sacred to you because maybe, just maybe, it will be enough. And when your neighbor dies, an old woman with cracked feet and eyes like dried dates, you help clean the body. You light a small fire near her head to guide the car. You smear her lips with beer and honey so her soul won't hunger in the underworld. You press her name into a small clay seal. You bury her. Not because the state demands it, because the spirit does. Because in Egypt, death isn't departure. It's a test, and no one should take it alone. You know the odds aren't in your favor, that the priests prioritize the rich, that the field of reeds might remain just that a dream. But you still leave bread and salt on your windowsill each new moon, in case your ancestors are watching. You still turn your head toward the west at sundown, not to mourn, to practice. And when someone asks why you bother, why you spend your few coins on oil instead of comfort, why you hum funerary chants while sewing tunics, you answer simply, I want to be remembered. Because here, memory is eternity. If no one remembers your name, you disappear. But if one person lights a lamp for you, you remain. Not as a ghost, as a possibility, a chance, a whisper that reaches the scales. You don't fear death. You fear being unprepared for it. So you prepare the only way you can with devotion, with repetition, with faith. You don't know if it's enough. But then again, that's what makes it sacred. They don't want to be here. Not really. But the bread is gone. And the field hasn't yielded since the locust came. And the baby's crying again, thinner than yesterday. So they dig, not in some sacred ceremony, not with priests or prayers, just two brothers and a rusted chisel in the dark, under a moon that refuses to look them in the eye. The tomb isn't fresh. It's been sealed for years, maybe decades. But even old graves hold value. Gold doesn't rot. Stone statues don't spoil. And so they chip. The air smells like dust and mouse droppings and something older like dried blood pressed into silk. The youngest coughs. The older one tells him to stop. Sound carries here. Even silence echoes. They push deeper. The tunnel is tight. The walls closing in. Every step forward is a gamble. If the roof collapses, no one will find them. No one will try. Because they're not mourners. They're thieves, but also sons and fathers and hungry. You wouldn't last underground. Not because of ghosts. Because of guilt. But they've learned to bury that too. They reach the chamber. It's smaller than expected. A single sarcophagus. Cracked. Two canopic jars missing their lids. A dried wreath of lotus petals still clinging to the corners like it remembers the ceremony. But in the back, tucked behind a crumbling relief of the god Osiris, something glimmers. A necklace. Beads of faience. Blue and white and sun-faded, but intact. Worth something. Enough to trade for barley. Maybe even fish. They take it. Carefully. Whispering apologies they don't believe in. Because no one feeds you for being polite. They keep going. A small gold ring on a mummified finger. A bronze mirror. A comb with someone's name etched into the handle delicate. Elegant. Forgotten. The younger one pockets it. The elder pauses. He remembers what his grandmother said once. While weaving baskets in the sun, every tomb has two curses. One is carved, one is chosen. He didn't understand then. He does now. But hunger always wins. They don't touch the body. Not out of respect. Out of fear. There are rumours of mummies that bleed when disturbed. Of tombs that breathe. That whisper names back to you in voices that sound like your own. But tonight, it's just stillness. Stillness and need. They finish quickly. They leave no footprints, only absences. And when they emerge from the ground, blinking into the brittle dawn, the world feels unchanged, but they are not. They walk home silent. No joy, no shame, just calculation. Will it feed them for a week? Will the market haggle? Will anyone ask where it came from? Probably not, because everyone knows. But no one says. Tomb raiding is survival. It always has been. Even in the golden days, when the pharaohs still ruled, there were those who chipped away at the edges of sanctity not out of greed, but out of desperation. You can't eat reverence. You can't boil incense. You can't feed your dying wife with a statue of Anubis, no matter how finely it's carved. So they steal and hope the gods understand, or forget, or forgive. They don't pray about it. Prayer is for the living, the full ones. Not for hands that tremble over ancient rings. Not for children too weak to cry. The gods don't come here. Only the desperate do, and the desperate don't ask permission. They carry the stolen goods in linen bundles tied tight. The mother will ask no questions. She'll bake the bread. The baby will stop crying just for a little while, and maybe that's enough. Maybe one meal, one moment of quiet is worth the risk. The curse, if it comes, will come later. Softly, like dust settling in the lungs, like a name lost in the wind. You wouldn't last underground, not because of what you'd see, but because of what you'd do. Because the worst part of tomb raiding isn't the crime. It's the part of you that doesn't flinch anymore. The part that chooses hunger over holiness. The part that survives and calls it mercy. He sits alone. Not because he's lonely, but because that's what power requires. In this room of stone and dust, he holds no sword, wears no armor, commands no army, but his reed brush is sharper than any blade. He dips it into black ink and makes a single mark on fresh papyrus. A mark that can outlive a man, a mark that can shape the future, a mark that once made cannot be undone. Because here in Egypt, to write is not just to record, it is to conjure. Each stroke is a spell, each word a ritual. And those who know how to shape language do not merely witness history, they create it. The scribe leans over the scroll. He moves slowly, deliberately. Every curve, every dot, every alignment must be exact. This isn't handwriting, it's architecture, it's control. One misplaced line, and a name becomes a curse, or vanishes altogether. Because to erase a name is to erase a soul. You wouldn't last a line. He was trained as a boykos not for his strength, but for his silence. For his ability to sit still while others shouted, to listen longer than others spoke. They tested his memory with gods and kings, timelines and prayers. They beat rhythm into his fingers until his hands obeyed ink like a dancer obeys music. By the time he was 12, he could copy a page with no smudges. By 15, he was writing blessings that others paid for with livestock and coin. Now, he sits in rooms with men more powerful than him, and yet none of them can do what he does. The vizier may rule the court, the general may lead armies, but the scribe decides what is remembered, and more importantly what is not. He can immortalize, or erase. A servant who pleases the pharaoh might receive praise from his hand. A priest who questions tradition might vanish from the temple records. The ink decides, and the ink listens to him. Sometimes he wonders about the weight of it, about all the men buried in sand whose names he struck from scrolls, about the prayers never answered because the invocation was miscopied just once, about the monuments built on lies he helped carve in neat, permanent lines. But then he looks down at the blank papyrus, at the reed in his hand, at the stillness of the room, and he knows this is power, not loud, not flashy, quiet, enduring, sacred. He knows the ancient stories of how Thoth, the god of wisdom, gave mankind writing not as a gift, but as a test, a sacred burden, a double-edged ink blade. To read is to learn, to write is to change. There are symbols he will never share, spells too dangerous for clay, words only spoken once at birth, at death, at judgment. He writes them anyway, in margins, in corners, in the spaces where no one looks, because he must, because if not him, someone else will do it badly, wrongly, fatally. There is no room for error in magic, or memory, or meaning. He keeps multiple copies, burns what he must, sleeps with one scroll always hidden near his mat, not for safety, for reassurance, because sometimes he dreams of fire, of flood, of wind scattering papyrus across the desert, and in those dreams, history disappears, just like that, but not if he can help it. He teaches a boy now, quiet child, thin wrists, eyes like still water, good hands. He shows him how to press, not drag, how to breathe between glyphs, how to tell a king's name from a god's with nothing but spacing. The boy struggles, makes mistakes, leaves blotches. The scribe watches in silence, corrects gently, because someday it will be the boy's hand shaping what lasts, and if that hand shakes, empires crumble. You wouldn't last a line. There's no glamour in this room, no feasts, no jewels, just ink, dust, light. But outside on the tomb walls, in temple gates, In the ledgers of grain and slaves and press his words ripple. They carry, they echo, they remain, and that is enough. He writes one final word, blows gently on the page, the ink dries, and with it, the future hardens into shape. You start the day looking surprisingly dignified. White linen, pleated carefully, a sash tied just so. You catch your reflection in the water, Jugson-kissed, composed, maybe even a little statuesque. 30 minutes later, you're boiling inside your own outfit, and no one warned you about the armpits. Not just sweat, though there's plenty of that. It's stick, the kind that glues fabric to skin like it's jealous of your independence. The kind that makes every movement feel like tearing bandages off a sunburn, because linen light, breathable. Elegant linen is a lie once the sun climbs past mercy. It was fine when you were standing still, sipping water under a palm tree, pretending you were royalty. But now you're walking, you're working, you're melting, your linen sticks. The bugs stay. You wouldn't last a sleeve. The tunic you admired this morning now clings like a wet napkin. Dust has crept into every hem. Sand grains have found their way into your waistband, your sandals, your eyelids, and it itches. It all itches. You reach to scratch your shoulder, and a mosquito lands on your forearm like it owns the place. You slap it. Miss, it bites you anyway. A gnat dives into your nose. You sneeze. The linen sticks harder. You ask someone nearby, how do they bear it? How do they live in this heat, in these clothes? Every day he shrugs. They're not clothes. They're proof you're not dead. Charming. The truth is, Egyptian fashion isn't for comfort. It's for survival. Thin enough to evaporate sweat. Light enough to signal status. Tight enough to avoid catching on tools or papyrus baskets. But when the breeze dies and the sun glares overhead like an angry god, all that design becomes decoration. Your skin becomes a complaint, and you have no right to voice it, because across the road, a woman in the same heat is grinding flour with a toddler strapped to her back, and her linen isn't even clean. It's patched, frayed. Smells like goat. She doesn't care. She's too busy surviving. Meanwhile, you're wondering if removing your tunic entirely is worth the shame. Spoiler, it's not, because even if you bare your shoulders, even if you sit in the shade, even if you fan yourself with a woven palm leaf, it won't help. Because the bugs stay. Not just mosquitoes, flies, horseflies, beetles that look like living jewels until they crawl down your neck and bite like soldiers. Every crease in your clothing is a hiding spot. Every fold is a trap. And the worst offenders fleas. You didn't think a creature that small could ruin a week. But here we are. They love linen, especially where it bunches knees, elbows, hips. You start walking funny. Not because of pride, because of itching. You try brushing them off. You try pretending they're not there. You try rubbing your legs with lemon peel. Someone told you it works. It doesn't. The sun reaches its peak. The linen is soaked through, and suddenly, dignity becomes optional. You rip the sash off, loosen the top, roll up the bottom hem and tie it into a makeshift belt, just to let your thighs breathe. A child passing by giggles. You glare. As wearing nothing, just a string around his waist with an amulet, and honestly, he looks cooler than you. You sit on a rock. Bad idea. It's hot. You jump up. Now your backside is steamed like barley. You fan yourself with your sleeve. It smells like wet onions and regret. Someone walks past, immaculate, dry, untouched by the plague of humidity that has claimed your body. You watch them like they're a ghost. How are they not sweating? Then you see it. They're carrying a fan. Someone else is holding an umbrella over their head. They're a noble. Of course. You're nobody. Nobody gets shade. Nobody gets breeze. Nobody gets relief. Just the same thin linen, the same biting bugs, the same judgmental heat. You wouldn't last a sleeve, and it gets worse. Later, you're invited to a gathering. Not formal, just neighbours. But still you try to clean up. You rinse your linen in a basin, scrub it with natron, hang it to dry. 15 minutes later, it's stiff and scratchy like straw. You put it on anyway. It's cooler now. The sun dipping behind the date palms. You feel hopeful. Then you sit on a mat and realise it's damp underneath. Not from water, from people. Everyone is sweaty. Everyone is itchy. Everyone is pretending this is fine. A woman next to you adjusts her shawl and a beetle falls out. She flicks it away without a word. A man across the circle sneezes, his tunic flaps, releasing a puff of dust. Someone fans themselves with a clay plate. Someone else scratches behind their ear with a carved bone. You breathe in, sweat, onions, incense, river breeze. You breathe out, acceptance. This is what fashion is here. Not glamour or not comfort, a test. Can you bear the linen? Can you bear the bugs? Can you survive the hour of the sun that makes your shadow disappear? Can you look dignified while actively dissolving? The answer, most days, is no. But you try anyway, because even if you're sweating through your dignity, you're still here, and that counts, just maybe not fashionably. Emotion, melancholy and reflective motif. You wouldn't last a childhood. Punchline childbirth, infection, the sun. Pick one. You wake up sore, not the kind of sore from one bad night's sleep, or a pulled muscle after an ambitious climb upstairs. No, it's the kind that starts in the spine and seeps into the ribs, that lives in the knees and settles, stubbornly, in the teeth. You're 35, and here, that's old, childbirth, infection, the sun. Pick one. Each has taken someone you know, and yet, you're still here. You feed the goats, sweep the mat, check the soles of your feet for splinters. Someone younger might call this life. You call it borrowed time, because no one expects to live past 40. If you make it to 30, they start calling you auntie. Even if you're not, they bow a little when you pass. Kids glance up from their chores and whisper like you're already halfway sacred. It's not reverence, it's surprise. You wouldn't last a childhood. Not here. Not in a place where the Nile overflows and takes the fever with it, only to return the next season with more. Where one cut on the ankle barefoot in the wrong canal can become a journey into pain, rot, prayer, and silence. Children know this too. They play near the water but don't run into it. They sniff fruit before biting. They watch their elders bury small bundles without asking who. A childhood here is short. If you're lucky, you survive it. If you're really lucky, you remember it. You remember chewing on reeds, their sour sweetness sticky on your fingers. You remember learning how to knead bread before you could reach the top of the table. You remember how your mother rubbed your back during the flood months when the air turned thick and your lungs burned with invisible heat. And you remember watching her fingers swell, crack, stiffen. She made it to 37. She was a marvel. You live fast not because you want to, but because everything around you insists. Marry early, work early, bleed early, hope, then do it all again for the next one in line. You've had 5 children. 2 survived. You don't say that out loud. It's not shame, it's math. You walk past the young girls at the mill. One is 12 and already betrothed. Her hair is tied back with care. Her eyes are wide and watching. She knows. They all do. There's no childhood here, only practice for the rest. And even that ends quickly. The sun is the first teacher. It burns lessons into your skin where to hide, when to move, how to breathe in sandstorms. Then comes childbirth. You don't get warnings, you get stories of women who screamed too long, bled too much, didn't return from the small, quiet room where babies and spirits fight for space. The midwife, when she visits, brings not just herbs but amulets. Not because she's superstitious, because she's seen too much. She ties the charm around your ankle and doesn't speak. That's how you know she's worried. And when it's done, if it's done, you do not rest. You get up, wrap the baby, wash your legs, start again. Because there's no pause here, no maternity leave, no casseroles, only heat, work, and more mouths to feed. You walk to the market, your hip clicks, your back grumbles, your breath shortens a little more every week. The girl at the stall barely 20 offers you a fresh pomegranate. You smile, but she says, "Take your time, mother," and you freeze. Not at the word mother, at "take your time," because you've forgotten how. They feared nothing except wasting life. There's a guilt to slowness here, to lounging, to leisure. If you sit too long, someone will ask if you're ill. If you say you're tired, someone will remind you of the neighbour who collapsed before harvest. So you keep moving, even now, even when your knees groan like ox cart wheels and your hands are more bone than flesh, because stopping feels like tempting something. The gods don't reward stillness. They reward resilience. You whisper prayers for your remaining children, not for success, not even for peace, just for age. Let them reach 30. Let them learn what it means to be called old and smile anyway. Let them live long enough to see their children survive a fever. That would be victory, because here, long life is the miracle no one writes songs about. Too quiet, too rare, too slow for the bards. But for you, it is sacred. You sit in the shade now, briefly. A breeze kisses your cheek. A fly dances past your lips. You close your eyes not from exhaustion, but reverence. This day wasn't promised. None of them are. But it's yours. And that, for now, is enough. You think you understand suffering, but you don't understand it like they did. Not as background noise, not as inconvenience, as foundation, as law. Pain, here, was a civic duty, a sacred currency, the invisible spine that kept the whole world upright. You wouldn't last a rule. From the way the bricks were laid to the prayers whispered over a broken toe, every scrape, every ache, every unspoken tear had meaning, structure, direction. The gods didn't ask for comfort. They asked for order, and that order required sacrifice. The sun scorched their backs for a reason. The floods drowned their crops with purpose. The weight of ritual, the sting of punishment, the relentless grind of labor, it all served one goal: to keep the world aligned. Balance. The force that stitched the stars to the heavens and told the Nile when to rise. Every painful thing was a thread in that weave. You wouldn't last a rule. They didn't just endure pain. They designed with it. They carved it into laws, into architecture, into the daily rhythm of life. To be born meant blood. To eat meant toil. To speak meant risk. To marry meant labor. To die meant expense. And yet it worked. Because without it, chaos, isfet, the opposite of order, the unraveling. To let pain slide by without purpose. To suffer without offering it to the structure that was the real nightmare. Not the blisters, not the hunger, not even the grief. It was the idea that any of it might be meaningless. So they made it mean something. A farmer's cracked heel was part of the pharaoh's grain quota. A scribe's hand cramp was a blessing on the records of kings. A mother's torn body at childbirth was not a tragedy. It was the mechanism through which gods returned to earth. Pain was the language the world spoke. They just learned how to listen and how to respond. You walk past a stone temple. Its fade is flawless, columns aligned, lintels straight, carving sharp. But touch the back wall, and you'll feel the uneven stone, the fingerprints of the enslaved, the workers, the masons who bled into the cracks. It's not hidden, it's not shame, it's legacy. Because civilization doesn't rise from leisure, it rises from bone, from back, from blister, and from belief. Every morning they knelt in prayer, knowing the day would bruise them, and every night they offered the bruise back to the gods like a tithe, not to complain, to participate. Because this was pain with purpose. Even the punishments were sacred. The lash wasn't just revenge. It restored harmony. The judge wasn't just an enforcer. He was a steward of divine alignment. Steel grain. You'd face a beating, not just to correct behavior, but to balance the weight of the wrong. Everything was an equation. A human life was not outside the system, it was a part of it. A tool, a sacrifice, a gear in the universe's machine. If your pain kept someone else alive, that was righteousness. If your discomfort prevented collapse, you were honored. No heroism needed, just discipline, just endurance. They built pyramids not with machines, but with meaning. Each hall of stone was a prayer, each sunstroke a signature of loyalty, each death on the construction line, a brick in eternity. You wouldn't last a rule, not because you're soft, but because you expect comfort to be your birthright. Here, comfort was a sin, or worse, an oversight. If you had extra bread, you shared. If you had fewer blisters, you worked harder. Because fairness wasn't measured by equality. It was measured by equilibrium. Everything in its place, everyone under pressure. That was justice. That was civilization. Not freedom but order. Not ease but endurance. And when they knelt in the dark, bodies bent from decades of sacred labor, They didn't ask the gods to remove their pain. They asked for strength to carry it better, and when they were buried, their coffins didn't boast of what they felt. They listed what they did, what they built, what they upheld, what they kept from falling. Because pain was never the enemy. The enemy was collapse, and the only cure was participation, even if it hurt, especially when it did. So no, you wouldn't last a rule. Not because you couldn't feel pain, but because you couldn't bear to let it mean something beyond yourself. They could, and they did. They had no Wi-Fi, no search bars, no digital backup of their souls. Just sun, stone, sweat, and something we no longer trust, memory. And yet, here they are. Still talked about, still painted into textbooks, still whispered about at midnight by people in beds far softer than theirs ever were. Still here, you wouldn't last a myth, because myths don't run on facts. They run on resonance. They require meaning that outlasts the body, symbols stronger than truth, and a voice that echoes even when no one's listening. And somehow, miraculously, they mastered that. With no podcasts, no cameras, no live streams, just pyramids, not built by magic, but by mortals. Mortals who woke before the sun, dragged limestone heavier than betrayal, stacked it with the precision of monks and the desperation of labourers who knew they'd die before the capstone was set, and they still did it. Not for wealth, not even for Pharaoh, for continuity, for the feeling that what you suffer might one day protect someone else. Even if you don't get to see it. That's not ego, that's legacy. And theirs worked. The world we know, the calendars, the architecture, the idea that a person can leave behind more than children began here. Under a sun that never apologized. You look at the Great Pyramid today and think, how did they do that? But the real question is, why did they? Because that stone doesn't feed you. That tomb doesn't shelter you. That statue doesn't bend, doesn't yield, doesn't care. And still they poured their lifetimes into making sure it lasted. It wasn't for show. It was to freeze time. To make one thing solid in a world that shook every harvest. Even now, the stones hold heat. Even now, their gods wear expressions we still struggle to understand. Even now, scholars argue about symbols carved by people who couldn't read but knew what mattered. They lived brutal, short, fragile lives, but they refused to live forgettable ones. Their cities crumbled, their names were stolen, their mummies looted, and still they surface in museum cases and dreams and conversations that start with, "Did you know that's power?" The kind no empire can reclaim once it's lost. The kind no app can mimic. You wouldn't last a myth, because to become one, you must live as if every choice echoes. You must trust that a small, painful act a brick set straight, a child taught a hymn, a field planted with trembling fingers might ripple across centuries. They didn't wait to be seen. They made themselves visible to the unborn. And now, here we are, thousands of years later, still peeking behind sarcophagus lids, still deciphering riddles in walls, still wrapping our tongues around names like Nefertiti and Imhotep and Hatshepsut, hoping the pronunciation alone might open some forgotten door. That's why we still talk about them. Because they left space for us inside their story. They built rooms we could visit, not physically, spiritually. They knew we'd come, curious and barefoot in our ignorance, and they prepared for that. They left maps, symbols, questions, answers with missing pieces, on purpose, not to frustrate us, to invite us in. They left myths the way a lighthouse leaves a beam to remind the wandering that something solid still stands. And it does. They do. Not as gods, not as conquerors, but as people who dared to be permanent in a world obsessed with speed, who wrote in stone while we scroll past meaning, who laboured in silence so we could whisper their names in the dark, centuries later, across languages they never heard, and they did it without electricity, without data plans, no Wi-Fi, just pyramids. You wouldn't last a myth. Because being remembered isn't about fame, it's about living in a way that dares to endure. They lived that way. They broke their backs stacking eternity into shape. And now, you rest beneath their gaze, wondering what you've left behind. Their message is simple: leave something that matters, shape something that stands, speak in ways that will outlive the breath. Because they did, and we still hear them, in stone, in silence, in dreams. So you made it. Kind of. You didn't last the sun. You didn't last the salt or the sand or the sweat behind your knees. You didn't last the food or the neighbours or the bugs who kept coming back for seconds. But you lasted in your mind. And that, here, is the only survival that counts. Because in ancient Egypt, death wasn't the end. It was the beginning of rest, the true kind. The kind where your body finally cools, your hands finally unclench, your name floats gently out of your mouth and into eternity, where it lives, preserved, as long as someone remembers how to whisper it. They believed this deeply, stubbornly, beautifully, not just in tombs, in breath. Every cough, every bruise, every bead of sweat was not just endured, but invested. Pain became proof of participation. Labour became an offering. Life brief, brutal, blistered was just the fee, the reward sleep, but not our kind. Not melatonin and blackout curtains. Their sleep had a garden, a field, a perfect mirror of this world, minus the heat rash and hoof blisters. The field of reeds, where grain grows tall as your chest and bends to your touch, where water runs cool and your favourite doggies. Even him waits patiently beside your hut, where nobody shouts, nobody steals, nobody hurries. You reap, you rest, you remember. That's what they worked for. That's what they bled for. Not wealth, not glory, peace, and not just for themselves, for the gods, for the family, for the dirt they pressed their footprints into, for balance. They didn't run from exhaustion. They offered it. They shaped it into bricks, folded it into bread, whispered it into prayers, and when they died, they asked just one thing: let my name be spoken, let my heart be weighed fairly, let me dream forever, not dreams of power, not dreams of conquest, dreams of rightness, the kind you might feel now, just a little. As your room darkens and the hum of night settles behind your eyes, you think you need a softer pillow? They needed only memory. You think you need a break from work? They needed only to know that they contributed. You think you need 8 hours? They needed eternity, and they made it. That's the part we forget. We imagine pyramids as relics. We forget they were built by people with crooked teeth and stiff knees and complicated dreams. People who scratched their heads and bickered with their siblings and secretly hoped their name would be etched just a little deeper than the others. And it was. Because here we are, thousands of years later, still whispering their names, still tracing their brushstrokes, still decoding their stories from the walls they left behind. They slept in the afterlife. Yes, but only after they made sure we'd be awake enough to notice them. That's their miracle. Not just that they survived, that they stayed vivid, that their voices, however cracked and fading, still find us. And they ask us only one thing in return: to listen, to remember, to breathe a little slower, to stop reaching for the next thing and start honouring the things that held. They didn't chase comfort. They built meaning. They didn't chase happiness. They protected harmony. And when their bodies finally collapsed, sunburnt, scarred, sacred, they lay down without regret, because they had done what they came to do. You wouldn't last a day, but they did, and they still do. So now, here in your bed, in the quiet hush of modern convenience, try just for a moment to live like they did. Not harder, not louder, just truer. Carry your pain with grace. Offer your exhaustion as a prayer. Let your sleep be earned not from productivity, but from purpose. And when your name is spoken again someday, may it bring the same soft exhale, the same shade of memory, the same sacred pause. Sleep now. Not just because the story is over, but because the story has done what it was meant to do. It remembered them. And in doing so, some memories fade with time, others linger in the air, not as images, not as words, but as scent. That's how you know something has lasted. You don't need hieroglyphs. You don't need stories. You just need to breathe in. In ancient Egypt, the gods didn't speak in thunder. They whispered through aroma, through the sharp bite of myrrh, through the sweetness of blue lotus crushed into paste, through the slow, rich smoke of resin curling up from a funeral offering. The afterlife had a smell, and they built their lives around it. It wasn't about perfume. It was about permanence. Because what else survives, long after the body crumbles and the voice is lost? The smell of resin-soaked linen, of cedar oil warmed by skin, of crushed herbs still stuck between a mummy's teeth. You wouldn't last a scent. Not in this world, where air fresheners drown out memory and antiseptic wipes erase the past. But in their world, smell was history. It was prayer. It was power. When you walk into a tomb quiet, respectful, half afraid, you expect to see stone, maybe faded colour, maybe dust. What you don't expect is the smell. It shouldn't still be there, but it is. A ghost of incense, too proud to leave. A faint echo of the rituals meant to carry the dead into eternity. They sealed their dead in scent, sealed their love, sealed their fears, not with silence, but with the slow burning breath of sacred things. You smell it and suddenly you're not alone. You're with them, in a dark room where priests murmured last words, where family wept into linen wrappings, where someone ground frankincense by hand, long after the mourners had left, just to make sure the gods would notice. You know eternity by how it smells, and in Egypt they made eternity smell good. It wasn't vanity, it was insurance. You embalmed a body not to preserve it from rot, but to preserve it for recognition. Because if the gods couldn't recognize your soul, your name, your scent, how would they find you in the field of reeds? So they used oils and spices not to cover death, but to shape it, to sculpt it, to remind the next world I'm still here, even if no one remembers my face, even if the writing fades, even if the stones crack. Smell me and know me. You wouldn't last a scent, because you use fragrance as decoration. They used it as identity, and not just in death. In life, too. A worker smeared crushed sycamore leaves into his armpits not to impress, but to survive a day under the sun. A woman dabbed blue lotus on her wrists not for a party, but to stay grounded while grinding grain for hours. Priests burned kifir, holy incense made from honey, wine, and 20 herbs, not because the temple stank, but because the gods listened better through fragrance. Scent guided everything. They didn't bathe to be clean. They bathed to reset the ritual. They didn't wear linen to stay cool. They wore it to keep the skin pure for the next blessing. Even lovers didn't kiss with words. They kissed with oils. One drop, pressed just below the ear, a conversation carried through skin. You wouldn't last a scent, because in your world, smell is forgotten. In theirs it was a signature. Walk past a kitchen in the Old Kingdom, and you'll know who lives there. The tang of leeks, the yeast of bread, the hint of coriander smoked from last night's fire. That was their address, their ancestry, their calendar. Smell the new year in the first papyrus blooms. Smell a wedding in the almond oil glistening on the bride's arms. Smell morning in the thick amber cloud of myrrh that sticks to your clothes even days later. No need to speak, just inhale. Because the dead didn't need to explain themselves. They needed only to smell like who they were. And so they packed themselves tight in spice, in perfume cones melted into scalp, in cinnamon pounded until it sang. They believed if you smelled like heaven, you might get there. Or at least, the gods might open the door a little wider. It wasn't superstition, it was strategy. Because scent more than sound, more than image travels. It drifts, it rests on walls, it hides in corners, it waits, it survives. Just like they did. You wouldn't last a scent. Because your life is digital. Theirs was physical. Scent was the watermark of presence, proof that something had happened here, something worth remembering. And when a scribe's scroll faded, or when time rubbed away a name carved in stone, it was the oils tucked into the tomb that still whispered their identity. Remember me, even if no one says it out loud, even if no one knows why the room smells like honey and rot and dust. They'll know someone mattered, because eternity isn't loud, it's fragrant, it doesn't knock, it lingers. And when you finally lie down, ready to sleep in a world that's always forgetting, you might still catch it, just faintly, that sacred blend of life and loss and longing, the smell of forever. There are no statues of them, no painted tombs, no songs written in their honor, just silence, just shadows, just a space where a name should have been. But they were real, and they mattered. Children who didn't get names. In ancient Egypt, the gods listened to names. Names were power, identity, a soul's passport to the afterlife. Without one, a spirit could drift lost, unrecognized, unrecalled. So when a child died too young before the naming ceremony, Before the ink had dried, they didn't vanish, but they didn't quite stay either. They lingered. In corners of reed houses where lullabies stopped mid-note, in blankets never used again, in the backs of paintings, where a tiny hand is visible, but the face is blurred. They weren't forgotten, just unnamed. Their mothers still whispered to them, late into the night, after everyone else had stopped. Fathers still carved a tiny mark behind the doorframe, a quiet tally of someone who didn't stay long, but still took up space in their heart. The village priest might pretend nothing happened. No ritual, no name to record. But the dog still sniffed the empty cradle. The neighbour still paused before asking, "How many children do you have?" He wouldn't last a whisper. Because in our world, we need proof. Birth certificates, photos, footprints in baby books. But in theirs, a single breath could mean a life. One cough, one blink, one cry before sleep, and then gone. But not erased. In tomb murals, you'll sometimes see a woman holding an empty cloth bundle. Art historians debate its meaning. But the people who lived it didn't. They knew. They always knew. There were lullabies meant for no one. Offerings left for children who never learned to chew. Blue beads placed in amulets to ward off bad breath, not foul smell. But the evil spirit said to steal life from infants, because they believed death could be averted. That magic could hold. That the gods, if moved enough, might blink and look away long enough for a child to survive. And sometimes they didn't. So you mourned. Not loudly, not with ceremony, but with quiet rituals of your own. Burning a bit of resin on the roof, where the smoke might reach the field of reeds. Stitching the baby's name that never got spoken into a hem of a cloak you never wore again. Leaving a thimble of beer by the river at night, hoping the spirit would visit in a dream. You wouldn't last a whisper. Because we don't know how to grieve the unseen. We move on, they stayed still, and in that stillness the child stayed too. Not haunting, not hurting, just hovering in memory's doorway, small and silent. In some tombs, you'll find miniature sandals, too small for any adult. No inscription, no explanation. Just the shape of a life that never learned to walk. In others, a child-sized scarab, held in the hand of a painted mother, who looks down but never smiles. Even in their mythology, the unnamed children made appearances, in stories where a baby cry is heard on the wind, in dreams where a stranger asks, "Do you remember me?" They were there. They are still there. Even now, when we uncover bones too small to survive time, archaeologists label them neutrally, infant remains. But if you lean close enough, you can almost feel the warmth of the arms that once held them. You can almost hear a whisper that never grew into a voice. You wouldn't last a whisper, because a name is not always a word. Sometimes it's the pause in a sentence, the slight turn of a head when no one's speaking, the soft a grandmother hums while folding linen. Sometimes that is the name, and they live on in it. They weren't forgotten, just unnamed. Not because no one cared, but because caring hurt too much. And yet they cared anyway. They made space. They set down one more bowl at the table during New Year's. They pinched off a corner of bread and left it near the garden. They walked slower past the sycamore where the child had once reached for a bird they couldn't catch. The grief was soft but deep, and it never really stopped. Not even when more children came, not even when the family moved. It simply folded itself into the linen, into the amulets, into the stories not told out loud, but passed through glances. The unnamed did not become gods. They became something quieter, the hush in a room that was once too loud. The empty line in a family tree that still makes everyone pause. The cool breeze at sunrise that smells faintly of breast milk and beeswax. They don't demand anything, just remembrance, a nod, a moment. You wouldn't last a whisper. Because in your world, silence is absence. But in theirs, silence was sacred. It was how they held what they couldn't say, and still can't. But if you listen, really listen, you might hear them, in the rustle of linen in a museum display, in the gentle tone of a tour guide describing a figure possibly female, possibly child, in the hesitation before the scribe skips a line, because sometimes the space is the message. Sometimes. Not saying the name is the only way to say it right, and in that quiet they live, still unnamed, still unspoken, but never unfelt. The wind always wins. It erases what it doesn't understand. Footprints vanish, tents disappear, cities dissolve into horizon lines. And still the desert is not empty, because forgetting the surface is not the same as forgetting what was underneath. The desert forgets footsteps, but not purpose. And Egypt was full of purpose. Every step taken across its burning sands, every basket hauled, every brick laid, every prayer muttered under a sun too cruel to care was never about the moment. It was about what would last beyond it. The sand does not remember names, but it remembers direction. The way thousands walk toward a temple that's now just rubble and heat. The way a priest once drew circles with his heel before kneeling to speak to gods who only whispered back through wind. You wouldn't last a silence, because in your world, silence is awkward. Here it's sacred. It's the only language the desert still speaks. Not in words, but in pressure, in stillness, in weight. Step into it, and you'll feel what they left behind. Not buildings, not statues, something stranger, something deeper. The sense that something happened here and mattered. No plaque, no timeline, but presence. Somewhere under your feet. Someone buried a sibling. Someone else made a vow. A merchant spilled a jar of oil and cried. A scribe threw a love letter into the wind, hoping a spirit might carry it across dunes. There's no record, just air, but air with memory. You can almost feel it brushing your skin differently, because they believed the desert wasn't empty. It was alive. It watched. It absorbed. It punished the careless and preserved the devoted. Sand wore away the sharp edges of injustice, but it sharpened the echo of intention. A man who beat his donkey here 1,000 years ago is forgotten. But a woman who once sat on this same rock and sang her dead daughter's lullaby into the breeze, the sand held on to that. You wouldn't last a silence, because you listened for sound. They listened for shift. The desert didn't give answers. It offered questions that got bigger the longer you stayed quiet. Why are you here? What did you bring? What will stay after you leave? And that was the strange, cruel magic of Egypt. Nothing survived unless it deserved to. Stone cracked, frescoes peeled, but a single shell bracelet, buried in a child's grave 3,000 years ago, still holds shape. A comb, carved from bone, still carries a strand of hair. Not because the desert is generous, but because it respects effort and memory. That's why you can walk for hours under the sun, see nothing but dunes, and still feel watched. Because you are. Not by gods, not by ghosts, by memory itself. Not yours, theirs. The people who laboured without certainty, who carved temples they would never pray in, who built tombs for rulers they never met, who mixed incense and bandaged bodies, and hauled water not for themselves but for continuity. They worked like they believed the desert would notice, and it did. Not immediately, not kindly, but eventually. You wouldn't last a silence. Because we expect applause, they expected erosion. They knew everything they built would be tested, not by war, by wind, and if it held, if it stayed, it was worthy. So they measured greatness not by how loud it was, but how long it lasted under pressure. Some things didn't, most didn't, but the few that did, the pyramids, the prayers carved into stone, the stories passed from father to son under starlight, they survived not because they were perfect, but because they were honest. The desert respects truth, not facts, but felt truth. Grief so deep it outlasts writing. Love so quiet it gets stitched into linen and buried with the dead. Duty so relentless it shapes generations of calloused hands. That's what the desert keeps. And if you listen closely beyond the hum of your fan, beyond the modern world's constant signal, there's still something speaking. Not in a voice, in pull, in the way certain places stop you without explanation, in the pause before you enter a tomb, in the sudden hush that falls when you read a name carved 5,000 years ago and realize they never imagined you, but they still built for you, still in the hush, still in the silence. The desert forgets footsteps, but not purpose. You wouldn't last a silence, but they did, and somehow, through heat and erosion and forgetting they're still speaking, and somehow you heard them. In your world, memory moves fast. Names trend for 24 hours, then they vanish, scroll long enough, and even the loudest disappear. But the Egyptians did something different. They didn't race to be remembered. They prepared, quietly, slowly, with intention that outlived them. They wrote names in stone not to be famous, but to be found again. They offered food to the dead not because the dead could eat, but because love doesn't need logic. They believed you don't stay in memory by shouting, you stay by mattering. And maybe that's still true. You wouldn't last a memory. Not in this world, where inboxes refill before breakfast and to-do lists forget your name before you do. But memory, the kind that lingers past breath, past blood and built-in frenzy, its built-in ritual, in the soft repetition of things that mean something, like kneeling to light incense, like folding a blanket the same way your grandmother did, like whispering someone's name when no one else is listening. The Egyptians called it mat, balance, harmony, the invisible order behind all things. You didn't have to be rich to honor it, just aware. Aware that your life brushed against something bigger. Aware that a word spoken kindly, or a chore done well, or a stone placed just right might last longer than you. They weren't chasing immortality. They were aligning with it, not by noise, not by speed, but by meaning. You wouldn't last a memory, but maybe now you can. Because remembering isn't a grand gesture, it's a decision. To pause, to notice, to mark something however small as worthy of attention, a breadcrumb on a stone plate, a smear of ochre on a child's toy, a small song hummed under breath, never written down, but somehow still echoing through time. That's how they survived. Not because they were louder than you, but because they lived like everything they touched might carry forward. And it did. A farmer's name scratched into the base of a statue meant for someone else still there. A child's drawing of a cat, etched into the wall of a tomb still there. A woman's recipe for fig cakes, found on the back of a tax record still there. All of it survived, because it meant something then. And that's the trick. The only trick. Meaning, they weren't trying to impress history. They were living it. Not later, not someday, now. And because of that, they lasted. Through silence, through sand, through fire and conquest and forgetting and rediscovery, they lasted. And they're still here. In your dreams, in your stories, in the quiet hum of your fan as you fall asleep. They're here because they didn't try to be memorable. They just tried to be true to their gods, to their families, to their work, to the brief, trembling miracle of existing. You wouldn't last a memory, but you could. Not with noise, not with urgency, but with care. Care for the things you touch. Care for the time you spend. Care for the people who will one day find the shape you left behind. They won't remember everything, but they'll remember how you made them feel. Just like you remember Egypt not by the details, but by the feeling. The warmth of gold on stone, the hush of a temple, the breath held at sunrise. That's how you last. That's how they lasted. So maybe tonight, as you lie in bed and let the past settle softly over you, you're not just learning about history. You're learning how to leave a piece of yourself behind, not with perfection, but with presence, with attention, with the quiet belief that what you do matters, because it does. And because one day, someone may find what you left, a note, a scent, a line of code, a worn page, and know you were here. You meant something. You mattered. You wouldn't last a memory. But now, maybe, you will. Not by noise, not by speed, but by meaning. Sleep well. You're part of the story now. As the last echoes of desert wind fade and your breath begins to slow, one thought lingers. Why you wouldn't last a day in ancient Egypt is more than just a bedtime story. It's a challenge, a reflection, a strange, poetic truth wrapped in linen, sun, and silence. You came here for rest, maybe even a little curiosity, but what you found was something else entirely. A rhythm older than language, a world where nothing came easy, yet everything carried meaning. In why you wouldn't last a day in ancient Egypt, every moment was survival, and somehow dignity. A life of blistered hands, blistered dreams, and the quiet resolve to keep going anyway. And now tonight you've walked through that world. You've squinted into the sun they worshipped, felt the grain of their bread in your teeth, shivered beneath their judgmental gods. You've seen how they lived, how they suffered, and how astonishingly they endured. Why You Wouldn't Last a Day in Ancient Egypt is not about mocking the modern world. It's about reminding us that some truths last longer than comfort, that stories honest ones survive even when everything else turns to dust. You didn't need to pass a history test. You just needed to listen. And you did. You lay still. You breathed slower. You stepped into the hush between centuries and allowed their world to hold you. That's why we tell stories like Why You Wouldn't Last a Day in Ancient Egypt, to remember not just facts but feelings. The sweat, the sand, the ache of doing something hard without applause. That's where the real memory lives. That's what stays. So sleep easy, knowing this: you may not have lasted a day in ancient Egypt, but for one quiet night you were there, and somehow they remembered you too.